people think it is.
White folks.
Shalom, Kahala Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Ba'ashem Ruach. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace, mercy to the elect, who the house of David reborn again in this generation. And shalom to the 130 Yasharala, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. So in today's lesson, we're going to go over that statement that you heard in the beginning of this video. You've seen that so-called white lady ask, what is in the Bible that many people don't realize is not in the Bible? To that, you had a reply from another so-called white lady who said, white people. And, though it's funny, it's not actually true. You see, the Bible has all the races of the world written within itself, especially the white people. But the thing is you got to understand what the white people, or what the Bible refers to them as, the Edomites have done to hide themselves. Okay? Because when you find out where, in fact, the Edomites, the so-called white people actually are in the Bible, you will then understand why they do not want to be identified in the Bible, and why they have done what they have done in rewriting and re-imaging the faces of the people written in the Bible. So let's go and get started. Let's go and read the story of when the first so-called white person came into the world. And this can be found in Genesis 25 and 25. It says, "And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau." Now, Esau was the evil twin brother of Jacob. From Esau, he is the forefather of all the so-called Caucasian race. Okay, Jacob, he is the forefather of the so-called Negro, so-called Latino, and so-called Native American races. Okay, when you get into the Bible timeline, when you look at the Bible timeline, they come in a little bit after the time when Abraham was selected by the Lord, right? And we know this time is around 1791 BC, right? It was before the Hammurabi laws were initiated over in Babylon, right? These were the first man-made, at that time, worldwide or known world laws that was established by a ruling kingdom of the time. Okay, up until then, you had laws created by individual tribes or fiefdoms, things of that nature, right? So this is a historical event that you could use to gauge, biblical events. Now that being said, the first so-called white person came onto the scene around, circa 1800 BC. Okay, before that, you pretty much had all people of color, right? All people of color, except for from the time of Cain and Abel. Because again, remember, Cain was given the mark of leprosy, which is to have your pigment removed. Then he went on to create the town of Enoch, right? Which ultimately was descendants of Cain, which them, along with the rest of the people who had lived on the earth, right? The Edomites, or what was left of the Edomites after the devastation that came. You had the flood of Noah, which basically killed off everybody on earth except for the 8 remnants, which included the 3 sons of Noah, right? And from these 3 sons come the first 13 nations. Okay, and this is what I'm talking about when I say that Jacob and Esau created the last 18 nations, because from Abraham, his first son Ishmael, you get the nation of Ishmael. You get also the Lot and his daughters brought forth the Moabites and the Ammonites, the so-called Chinese and the Japanese. And then ultimately, Isaac brings forth Jacob and Esau, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, and the so-called Caucasians. Now, that being said, let's read a little bit about the Edomites, because like I said again, the Edomites are all over the Bible. They're referred to as the Edomites, Esau, the wicked, primarily. Let's read one scripture that stands out. This is Obadiah 1 and 3. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee. Thou dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? So this is over in Sweden, right? This is simply one of the major cities bound in the clefts of a rock, right? Now this isn't specifically, that scripture wasn't specifically talking about this, but when you get into the spiritual markers upon these Edomites, they love living amongst mountains, man. Their name derives from coming from the mountains, man. They come from the Caucasus Mountains. You see, after they had reigned in Rome, once out they were established there, and they eventually lost it around 200 or 400 AD, after the Israelites took over, right? The so-called Negroes took over. They fled up to the Caucasus Mountains, right? And they stayed there for about 1,000 years, which is where they renamed themselves the Caucasians, from the Caucasus Mountains. And when they came out of the Caucasus Mountains, which was around 1200 AD to 1400, they eventually took over the known Europe, because of what had happened is the Black Plague had happened. It took out 1/3 of all the known world's population, which was basically the Israelites who had been ruling in that time. And this let the Edomites, who had crept into power, right, through their banking systems, their joining on to militaries, everything, it let them regain control of Europe, right? And this is what's known as the Renaissance, right? And you can find all about this, man. And if you watch the shows, the Borgias or Borgia, and you could read about these devils who basically took over the Vatican and took over the world. There's also another show called the Medicis that show how the Borgias were able to get into their seat of power and get control of the Vatican, right? This is Malachi 1 and 4. Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith Yahweh Bashim Ashai of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom Yahweh Bashim Ashai hath indignation forever. So when you understand that Edom is a group of people that the Lord has indignation forever against, then you understand why they're trying to hide themselves. Well, like I said, man, they're trying to hide themselves amongst the good crowd in the Bible, right? They have taken their spot of being the wicked in the Bible, and they basically try to hide those people, the Edomites, pretend, they never teach about them in the churches, they never talk about them in their movies, right? Out of all the biblical movies, where's the movies about Esau? Where's the movies about the Edomites? Where's the movie about Haman, the Agagite, and all these people, right? They don't make it, right? But they'll make movies about Moses, about Noah, about Jacob, and all these people, right? Because, and who do they put in, to play them? So-called Caucasians, like what you're seeing here. You had the pharaohs. Remember, these are the pharaohs of the Hamite lineage, right? Back in the time of Moses, okay? This is before Alexander came through and took over and put his general Ptolemy over Egypt, when white people were the rulers, right? But this is the time when blacks were the rulers, man. Look who they have here. Sigourney Weaver, man, right? And all these other actors, white actors, playing. These should all have been so-called black people here, man. Like this guy right here. They should all have been that color, right? And when you look at other, biblical movies, they're, the Messiah is painted up like a leprous dog, man. A white person with blue eyes, or they make him look like he's an Arab, right? And this goes for all movies, man. Though some of these, actors have played the role well, the depiction is all wrong, right? And what does this do? Well, it tells you very plainly, man. This sets up white supremacy, right? Edomite supremacy over the world.
I'm Professor Thomas R. Zoo. In history, we know that every great civilization was founded on slavery. Let us take the classic examples of Greece and of Rome, from whence you gentlemen come. It's God's and nature's law that man attempt to prevail over his fellow man. So if one becomes the master, one becomes the slave. Let us remember that God is white, and as long as God is white, we will prevail over all other races.
Sorry, Professor. What was that you said?
God is white, and as long as God is white, we shall prevail over all other races.
Beg your pardon, Professor, but with all this confusion, would you mind repeating?
God is white, and as long as God is white, we shall prevail over all other races.
Thank you very much.
And it's gone to the point where these Edomites, they've taken the image of the Messiah and they basically made him into a patriot, right? As you can see here in this comic, man. It's hilarious, man. These people, you know, they have no scruples, right? But when you go all the way back, like I said, you could trace this re-imaging of the Messiah to this man named Cesare Borgia, who lived in 1490, right? He was the son of Pope Alexander VI, right? Whose real name was Rodrigo Borgia, right? Who, again, and they were Edomites, right? And of that tribe of the Edom, they were of the top tribe, Amalek, okay? And let's watch this video real quick so you can hear it for yourself.
Hey guys, the gig is up. I'm not the real Jesus. As a matter of fact, the fella's name wasn't even Jesus. He had a Hebrew name. There wasn't a letter J until a few hundred years ago. With that being said, I have fooled the whole world into the biggest sham of all time. The name and identity of the real fella has been taken over by me. There are thousands of paintings of Jesus and they don't even come close. Jesus was the creation of the Roman Catholic Church, which served to replace the real fella who probably looked more like Morgan Freeman. But who cares? The truth doesn't matter, as long as you pay your tithes.
So you see that? So this isn't just some wild conspiracy theory that us Hebrew Israelites have made up. No, man, this is verifiable historical facts. And it is known by those who actually look into this stuff. So, besides that, let's read this. This is Revelations 12 and 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Right? And that right there is referring to the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Okay? This old serpent wasn't an actual snake. It was what you would know as the progenitor to the Caucasian race that would eventually come back onto the world through the loins of Adam, right? Because remember, it came first as Cain. Cain was eventually wiped out through the flood, and then it was reborn again through Esau, okay? And from Esau's lineage, you have what you have today, the so-called Caucasian race, right? You got this devil here, Cesare Borgia. Let's just read some of the wisdom that has come out of this devil's mouth. He says, in the Garden of Eden, Eve showed more courage than Adam when the serpent offered the forbidden fruit. She knew that there was something better than paradise. Can you believe that shit, man? You got the serpent himself trying to beguile people through his fucking deep wisdom of folly, man. You see that? That's disgusting. And just like you have deceivers of the Edomite race, you also have deceivers of our own people, man. You have this false Israelite or false prophet group called One Body in Yahweh Shai, who are basically castaways from IUIC, man. You look at them, man, they got no fucking soul in their body, man. They're basically, right? Like, what does the Lord say? They're like white sepulchers with dead men's bones inside, man. These guys have taken the bag, man. They've taken the IUIC's formula for making money, and they're basically following it, man. But instead of purple and gold, they're black and gold, right? But you've heard these people come off, right? Like their main guy, Japheth or whatever his name is, or Jephthah, right? He says that, or their teachings from that guy is that the Messiah, Yahushua, didn't perform any miracles. That the latest thing that you're hearing, and the latest thing you're hearing now, is that Alexander the Great and the Greeks were Israelites. When it is very plain to see, and by the way, look at this, man. They're getting horrible marks. I had to even mark them down, man, because this is fucking folly, right? But look at this, man. I can't believe that there's so many people. At least there's some good people here who are calling them out for what it is. But look at this great video elder, right? What else is this? Look at this guy saying Alexander was a Japheth. Man, this guy's an idiot, right? Let's see. This guy here calls him out. That's good. Let's see what else. Never thought I'd say this, but you bros going hella off, right? That's right. We give Esau too much credit when we were not in this truth. That man never established anything until the 1600s. Man, this guy's a fucking idiot, man. You see, these are the castaways from that the Most High has rejected, man. Anybody who is following this group sincerely, they're lost. They are the blind being led by the blind, man. And they're both gonna shortly fall into the ditch. That being said, let's go into Alexander the Great, okay? You see, Alexander the Great, he was an Edomite, right? But he didn't refer to himself as Edom. At least nothing historically that puts him directly attached to that, though. However, he does refer to himself as the Macedonian, okay? Now, one thing about Alexander is that the reason why he was so great is because the Lord was dealing with him. And why was the Lord dealing with him? Well, he was dealing with them to fulfill prophecy, because the Edomites were given the gift of weaponry, right? The gift of the sword, of a great sword that is, right? And also that they would be given the riches of the world. Well, Alexander, not only did he establish a foothold for the Edomite race upon the earth, but he also fulfilled prophecy of splitting up the Judites, right? The tribe or the southern kingdom that was still in the land of Jerusalem, right? Because it was under him that Jerusalem was conquered, and eventually was after the Greeks came in, the Romans came in, right? And that's where you get the story of Yahushua. Now, if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, straight-up historical details, there's a documentary which I'm going to post in the description of this 5-hour documentary that this couple, that this Macedonian couple go through and read all these old historic records of the Macedonians when they came in to the Greek civilization during what is known as academically as the Greek Dark Ages. Okay, this is basically when the Edomites, who were known as the Macedonians at the time, came in and basically took over the Greeks. When you understand geology and anthropology, the Greeks are the people who you would know today as the people of the South Seas, the Fijians, the Hawaiians, those like the Thailand people. Those are the Greeks of old. Okay, they were driven out by the Macedonians. And again, all these details are all in here. You have this. Let's watch a little bit of it so you can see what this is about.
In fact, a vile fellow of Macedon, from which a respectable slave could not be purchased formally.
So, why did Demosthenes call Philip a barbarian? What did this word mean in the antics? Scientists are almost unanimous that the noun barbarian in the antics referred mainly to people who spoke a language incomprehensible to the Greeks, with a dose of underestimation to their culture. Practically, all the nations that didn't speak Greek were called barbarians by the Greeks.
And it goes on, and it's deep, man. It shows you from migration patterns, the lineages of people and the lands, everything. These people really got into it, man. And it was like a 52-piece documentary that I put all together, and it ultimately came into a 5-hour documentary. So, I know it's long, but if you really want to find out who these Macedonians were, and how they were not the Greeks, watch this documentary. Now, let's get into just who Alexander the Great was, okay? Because again, remember, these devils, these false prophets at One Body for Yahweh Shai, are saying that Alexander the Great was an Israelite, right? Which is totally false. That's not it. That's a false doctrine. And what that does is it placates and exonerates these Edomites from the atrocities that they did, right? And it also breaks prophecy, right? So these devils got it all wrong, and they're misleading a lot of people. But let's read this first. We're going to read it from 1 to 9. This is 1 Maccabees 1 and 1. And it happened after that, Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, right? This is Alexander the Great, okay? This is his father, Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim and had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece, right? And why was he the first over Greece? Because they took over the Grecians, and he was the first king that was set up over the Grecians, man. Okay. And made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he would die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom amongst them, while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule, every one in his place. And after his death they all put on crowns upon themselves. So did their sons, and after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. All right, and who were those 4 generals, those servants of Alexander? Well, when you get into the book of Daniel, he talks about the Grecian Empire, right? He talks about how Alexander would come in and he would be like a leopard, right? And ultimately how this leopard would have 4 wings, right? Well, those 4 wings, or the 4 horns, right? They came out of the horn, which was Alexander. They were Cassander, who took over Macedonia and Greece. You had Lysimachus, who took over Thrace and Asia Minor. And you had Ptolemy, who took over Egypt. And you had Seleucus, who took over Persia and Asia. Okay, these were all Edomites, so-called white people. Okay, so when you see the white people talk about how they used to be the rulers of Egypt, like what the royal family does, right? How they trace their royalty back to the Egyptians. They're talking about this. They go back to the line of Ptolemy, right? So these are the devils, the Edomites, that came from Alexander's rule. Okay. Now that being said, let's go into that term Macedonian, right? Because you can also find this here, right, in the additions to Esther found in the Maccabees, right? This is the part in Esther that they took out because they didn't want you to read about this part. And why is that? Because in Esther, well, first we'll go and just read this part, right? This additions to Esther 16 and 10. For Amon, or Haman, a Macedonian son of Amadatha, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood and far distant from our goodness, and as a stranger received of us, right? And obviously the point here is that he's a Macedonian. Now, in the regular book of Esther, right, which again has been left in the Bible, right? Because they literally cut this Bible with this book here in half, man. Let's see what they call Haman in their efforts to hide who Haman was. because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagites, right? What are Agagites? Well, they're not Macedonians, right? An Agagite is an ancient name of a people, right? We're going to get into that. And who were they? The enemy of all the Jews, and devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, which is a lot, that is the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. Okay? Now, Agagites. Let's look into that. When you get into Esau's lineage, right, he had a wife, Ada, right? And from them comes a son, Eliphaz. And Eliphaz named, apparently I think she was like a harlot or something, like a prostitute, Timnah, and from them comes the son Amalek, right? And from Amalek come the Amalekites, and from the Amalekites comes a man named Agag, okay? And Agag is where you get the Agagites, okay? And that's also when you see the map where the Macedonian area was at, and you talk about the Aegean Sea, that's where the term Aegean Sea comes from. It goes back to Agag, right? The Agagites. And from them come the people that you refer today as the so-called Jews, who in fact are Amalekites, right? Or Edomites, right? The people who like to paint themselves as the ancient Jews of old time, right? They like to make you believe that this is what they used to be like, man, in the Bible. But no, it's not, man. These are the devils who have taken over. And how do we know this? Well, you gotta look in history, okay? It tells you here. This is this tells this was the king. His name was Kagan Bulan of Khazaria, right? Which is basically, right? If you look at the mountains right here, this is the Caucasus Mountains, right? And even though the Caucasians had left this area, went down to Italy and went down into Europe, the Khazarians, the Amalekites, right, the top tribe of Edom, they stayed in the Caucasus Mountains, and they took over the north area of the Caucasus Mountains, and it was referred to as Khazaria, right? Well, they were a pagan nation. They were basically a bunch of witches and warlocks, okay? They did blood rituals and all that wickedness. And what happened? Well, they were surrounded by Christian, or what was known as like Catholic powers, the Byzantine Empire, and the Ishmaelite Islamic empires, right? And they were afraid to be taken over by these other nations. So what they did is they went in and they decided to convert. Let's go and just read it right here. It says, Bulan was a Khazar king who led the conversion of the Khazars to Judaism in 740 AD. Surrounded by Muslims and Christian forces, being a pagan nation made him a target for invasion. For safety, he decided to convert his kingdom to a neutral belief of Judaism. And since the original Hebrew people were lost, taking their identity and hiding its pagan rituals and language within the Hebrew characters, which is known as Yiddish today, would be easy. In the Schechter letters, Khazar King Joseph traces his lineage back to King Bulan and explains the reform of the Khazar ruler Obadiah, responsible for much of the kingdom's Jewish conversion. Today's so-called Jews are descendants of the Khazars and have no blood ties to the Hebrews of the Bible. They have cleverly hidden their identity from the outside world while inwardly pursuing their pagan worship of their god, Remphan, also called Molech, worshiping the star Remphan, which they now call the Star of David, and was the seal used to identify Khazaria. With their false identity, they've gained control of much of the world's leading industries. Right? Check that out, man. And these Schechter letters that this refers to is these right here, right? These are documents that are stored right now at the University of Cambridge, right? And they're referred to as the Schechter letters, right? And basically, they were a correspondence between this man here, Solomon Schechter, and this man here, who was, it says, Hazadai Ian Shaprut. He was an Amalekite diplomat to the Islamic Caliph Abdur Rahman III, this guy here, right? Basically, he sat in the king's court, right? So basically, this man here found letters between this man and the Khazar king named Joseph, okay? And let's read it. It says, the Schechter letters are a collection of papers found in a Cairo Ganisa and has a Khazar correspondence from 950 AD between Hasdai ibn Sabrut, foreign secretary of the Caliph of Cordoba, and Joseph Kagan of the Khazars. It gives both an account of the Khazar conversion to Judaism and of its progress in subsequent generations, as well as details of the fall of the Khazar Empire in 969 AD. Okay? So you see, these people here that you see with these Israeli flags, everything, they're not the Jews. They are Khazars. And when you trace their lineage back, they go back to the Macedonians, which go back to the Agagites or the Amalekites, which ultimately go back to the Edomites. So these people here are the Edomites, and that fulfills this prophecy. This is Ezekiel 36:2. Thus saith Yahweh, Ba'ashem El-Shai, our power, because the enemy hath said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Let's skip down to verse 5. Therefore, thus saith Yahweh, our power, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen and against all Edom, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart. Right? Showing that Edom would take the land of the Lord, right? The land belonging to the Israelites. And that's what these devils have done. Right? And like I said again, these devils even have come out and ratted on themselves. Man, there's this man, Arthur Koestler, which was assassinated because he brought out the truth. He wrote a book called The 13th Tribe that explained that the so-called Jewish state, the so-called Jewish people, were a false people, that they were not in fact connected to the Bible, and that if they were in the Bible, that there would have to be a 13th tribe. He says here in the quote, he says, the story of the Khazar Empire as it slowly emerges from the past begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated, right? And that's because this man here, he tried to find his lineage back to the Bible, and then he eventually found out that him and his people, in fact, go back to the Khazarian bloodline, man, right? And then which he didn't know that ultimately went back to the Edomites, right? That ultimately goes back to ancient history, but we found that out, man, right? And these devils, man, they make no, they're not quiet about who they truly worship or who they really, bow down to. This man here, Harold Wallace Rosenthal, right, an Amalekite. Let's see, he writes, he says, most Jews do not like to admit it. And when he says Jews, he's talking about Amalekites. Most Edomites do not like to admit it, but our God is Lucifer, and we are his chosen people. And damn right, Harold, you're an Edomite, man, and you are Satan's representative on earth. This is why these devils have the whole world in subjection right now, man. This is why the earth is in the horrible state it is, because these devils, the ambassadors, the representative of Satan on earth, are in rulership right now, right? Just as it told you in the Bible that they would be, man, that they would be in rulership before the second coming of the Messiah, which we are soon to come to, okay? These devils have had their chance to rule. They have destroyed the earth, and the Lord is soon to come to destroy them. And how do we know that? Because the Bible tells us so, right? And not only that, but they themselves understand this. Because when you get into the Zondervan, which is an Amalekite family, right, an Edomite family who writes the Compact Bible Dictionary, their description for Edom says this. It says, Edom figures prominently in the prophetic scriptures as the scene of great future judgment. She is the only neighbor of the Israelites who was not given any promise of mercy from God. Right? So there you go. So that is what the true place of the white people in the Bible are, right? The white people are in the Bible, but it's just not a pretty place for them. So hopefully this video was edifying, Akim. Hopefully this shows you that that group, one body in Yahweh Shai, are a bunch of fools, false prophets. You know, please stay away from them. You know, do yourself a favor, run. You know, don't give them any money and block them if you have to, right? But with all that, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem, Kodash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders, great millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect. Shalom.